The desert begins before the mind is ready to name it. An endless sea of pale dunes breathing beneath the moon. Every grain of sand a memory. Every ridge a ripple of something ancient that still dreams beneath the surface. The air is cool now, though it carries the taste of heat left behind by a vanished sun. Somewhere in that stillness, the wind begins to hum. Not loud, but steady, like a thought half-remembered. It moves across the sand as if tracing a buried path, and there, in its wake, a shadow begins to rise. A shape emerges, a doorway, perhaps, or the memory of one. Half-sunken columns lean like tired sentinels. Between them, the remains of a staircase descend into the earth, swallowed by centuries of drifting dust. Travelers once spoke of this place in whispers, a temple built for the wind, where no priest ever spoke, and no prayer was ever answered aloud. Some say it was raised during the reign of forgotten kings in Lower Nubia. Others claim it predates the dynasties themselves, carved by nomads who worshipped sound rather than idols. The entrance sighs as one steps closer, the air shifting like fabric drawn aside. A lantern's glow touches the walls, the color of honeyed stone, carved with spirals and lines that shimmer faintly beneath thin layers of sand. The wind slips through these hollows and turns them into instruments. It hums in octaves, each corridor singing a different note. What remains of the roof opens to the night, and the moonlight falls like slow water upon inscriptions that flicker and fade, as if unwilling to be seen for long. The first chamber is for prayer. Its floor is marked by circular depressions, worn smooth by kneeling forms long turned to dust. Offerings of dried lotus, now nothing but scent and ash, rest in broken bowls. The wind moves through the room and the faint sound of chanting seems to drift within it. Not words, only breath and tone, like the ghost of a choir that once filled these walls. In ancient tongues, they called such sound the breath of devotion, believing that air itself was holy, that every exhalation carried a fragment of spirit back to the heavens. The second chamber is for silence. No carvings here, no script, no shape. Only walls curved in such a way that all sound falls inward, swallowed whole. The silence feels alive, dense, like velvet pressed to the ear. Standing here, the listener feels as though the world outside has paused. This, perhaps, was the true heart of their faith, not words but the spaces between them. Some scholars believe this chamber was a sanctuary for oracles who listened to the wind until visions came. Others believe it was a test, a place to confront the vastness within oneself. And deeper still, down a narrow passage that smells of dust and age, lies the third chamber, the chamber of remembrance. Here the walls shimmer faintly with what remains of pigment: ochre, cobalt, gold. Figures are etched into the stone. Men with raised palms, women carrying lamps, stars arranged in a spiral above their heads. Beneath them, an inscription almost legible through the erosion of centuries. To the one who listens, a God without form, without image, only presence. The people who carved this temple must have believed that divinity was not a voice that spoke, but an ear that received. You rise and walk toward the light. The sound of water fades behind you, leaving only stillness and the faint echo of your breath. And somewhere beneath the floor, a sigh answers, too soft to be real, too human to be forgotten. There was once a city that built towers to touch the clouds, towers of pale stone, smooth as bone, crowned with great bronze bells that gleamed like captive suns. From valley to hilltop, their domes shimmered above the fog, and their sound ruled the hours. At dawn, the bells were light. At noon, they were thunder. At dusk, they softened into lullaby. But the people below had forgotten what silence was made of. They said the city never slept, and yet one day it never woke. The story begins on a morning like any other. The air was full of sound, the hum of workshops, the murmur of markets, the chatter of bells calling the faithful and the weary alike. But as the sun reached its height, something in the tone of the bells began to shift. The rhythm stretched, slower and slower, until the notes blurred into a single, endless resonance. No one noticed at first. The bells had always been the heartbeat of the city. But then the light began to bend, gold thickening into amber, as if time itself had slowed to listen. When the great tolling finally ceased, the city fell still. The baker's hand froze mid-motion, the potter's will turned one last time, and the pigeons that had circled the towers hung suspended in the air, wings outstretched like offerings. From the tallest spire to the quietest alley, the entire city sank into a single breath, deep, calm, eternal. The bells, they say, had been cast from relics of the old world, fragments of broken idols, melted swords, even meteorite iron carried from far deserts. Each carried its own history, its own vibration. When joined, they did not merely ring. They remembered. Some whispered that the city's rulers had tried to make the sound of eternity, to bind their glory in tone. Others believed the bells were a gift, meant to call the gods to listen. But no god answered. Only sleep came, vast and merciful. Now, centuries later, the towers still stand. The air around them is soft, heavy with the scent of rain and dust. Ivy has climbed the facades, curling around arches and broken windows. The bells hang unmoving, greened with age, yet the faintest breeze makes them quiver, not with sound, but with presence. You walk through streets carpeted in moss, past doorways where vines curtain the forgotten. In the dim light, you glimpse the outlines of people. Not bodies, but shapes imprinted in dust, like shadows that refuse to fade. At the far end stands a sealed door, a slab of basalt black as night, fitted so perfectly that even the wind cannot slip through. The stone hums faintly, just at the edge of hearing, as if vibrating with memory. Touching it, one feels a pulse beneath the fingertips, like a heartbeat long after death. No one knows what lies beyond it. Excavators who once came here, in 1932, the journals say, marked the place and moved on, claiming the sands reclaimed their camp overnight. The coordinates vanished from their notes, replaced by pages torn away. Scholars who came here in later ages wrote of the stillness. They found the city unspoiled, as if preserved by its own breath. Tools lay on benches, fruit turned to stone, candles hardened mid-drip. Birds nested in towers but never sang. Even the air felt enchanted, thick with the residue of unbroken tone. One explorer wrote that as night fell, he felt a low vibration beneath his feet, a heartbeat echoing through the cobblestones. He swore he could feel the bells breathing beneath the ground. You stand now in the plaza at the city's heart. The great bell tower rises above you, its shadow long and blue. Through the cracked door, a staircase spirals upward, endless, echoing. Each step releases a faint hum, a note too soft to hear but felt through the soles. The air grows warmer as you climb, and the smell of old metal fills your lungs. Near the top, you emerge into a chamber bathed in pale light. The great bell hangs there, immense and patient. On its surface, faint carvings shimmer like veins. Lines of script no one has yet translated, curves that resemble waves or the folds of a sleeping face. If you place your hand upon it, the metal feels alive, cool, yes, but vibrating with something ancient, like the memory of sound. And in that contact, a vision unfolds. Streets filled with laughter, markets alive with color, rivers of light moving through alleyways. A city awake and endless, full of breath. But then the tone returns. Deep, enveloping, and everything slows, folding again into rest. You pull your hand away, and the image dissolves like mist. Outside, twilight gathers. The first star appears above the tower, mirrored in the metal's dull gleam. The wind stirs faintly through the streets, and for an instant, the smallest of the bells trembles. A soft note escapes, not loud, not complete, just enough to make the air remember. It echoes once, twice, then fades into the horizon. Perhaps the city is not dead at all, only dreaming. Perhaps the people within are not gone, but wandering through a long, shared sleep, walking streets of light that exist only within the resonance of that final tone. And perhaps the bells, still patient, still whole, are waiting for the right silence to wake them again. As you leave, the sky darkens, and the towers gleam faintly against the stars. The wind moves softly, carrying the scent of metal and rain. In the distance, you think you hear a faint toll, not in your ears, but in your pulse. A single note, returning home. Too faint to wake, too perfect to end. Some nights, under a rising moon, the desert above trembles with the faintest music. Locals call it the breathing of the temple. They say if you place your ear to the ground, you can hear a low chorus, countless voices blending with the sighing wind, as though the air itself remembers the worship that once filled it. Some believe it is nothing more than the wind funneling through old stone. Others, less certain, say the temple is not empty at all, that its worshippers never left, they simply became the sound. The monastery stands where the land ends, where cliffs lean over an ocean so vast that even the wind forgets its way home. Its walls are salt-paled and cracked, its roof silvered by centuries of mist. The monks who once lived here are long gone, leaving behind only the slow drip of water and the scent of old incense that lingers like an unfinished prayer. At the farthest edge of the western hall lies a small chamber, circular and bare. The only light comes from a narrow window facing the sea. In the center of the room, on a stand of black wood, rests a mirror. But no image moves across its face. Even when light touches it, it gives nothing back. The air before it feels heavier, as though the mirror consumes what it sees. The surface is dark, not dull, but deep. A darkness that seems alive, swallowing rather than reflecting. The monks called it the unseen glass. They said it was not made by human hands but found, washed ashore one morning after a violent storm, half buried in kelp. No craftsman claimed it. No origin was recorded. Yet from the day it arrived, the monastery changed. Those who gazed into it never saw themselves. Some saw the faint outline of stars turning beneath water. Others saw faces they had forgotten. A mother's hand, a child's laughter, a stranger's eyes from dreams long faded. A few saw nothing at all and wept without knowing why. The abbot ordered the mirror to be covered, wrapped in cloth woven from midnight-dyed wool. But still it hummed. At night, the wind carried its vibration through the corridors. A low pulse, like a heartbeat within the stone. When you stand before it now, centuries later, the air hums with that same quiet tension. You reach out, though the body hesitates before the mind. Your fingers brush the cloth. It feels warmer than it should. Slowly, you draw it aside. First, there is nothing. Only depth. A silence so dense it seems to draw your breath inward. Then, faintly, light begins to move, not across the surface, but within it. Not reflection, but memory. Shapes stir. An archway, a lantern, the suggestion of a figure walking through mist. They dissolve, reform, become something else. It is as though the mirror is dreaming and you are caught in its breath. The glass, if it is glass at all, seems to hold its own sky. Tiny specks shimmer like constellations adrift in black water. Somewhere within that darkness, a ripple forms, slow, deliberate, like a sigh. You lean closer, drawn not by curiosity, but by something older, an ache you cannot name. And for a moment you see not yourself, but the space around you reflected perfectly. The stone, the window, the faint curve of the world outside, but your body is absent, as though the mirror has remembered everything but you. Somewhere in the archives of the coastal abbeys, there is mention of this object. A record from the 11th century tells of a darkened-looking glass from the isles beyond time, believed to be the work of the glassmakers of Alexandria who sought to capture not light, but its shadow. They wrote that a mirror which refuses reflection becomes a vessel for truth cannot be seen directly, only felt through what it withholds. The ocean beyond the window swells, the tide breathing against the rocks far below. Each wave seems to echo the rhythm of the pulse within the mirror. You realize slowly that the mirror is not showing you absence. It is showing you everything the world forgets to see. The space between light and dark, the silence between names, the stillness that remains after sound. You close your eyes. Behind the lids, the darkness blooms, vast, gentle, infinite. And there, in that quiet, you begin to hear what the mirror has been whispering all along. Not words, but the sound of your own breath reflected back to you. Slower, steadier, endless. The body loosens. The air thickens. It is not frightening. It feels like returning to something that has waited patiently for you to remember. Perhaps the wind is their scripture, still moving from dune to dune, carrying prayers too soft to fade. When you open your eyes again, the mirror's surface has softened. The depth remains, but its edges shimmer faintly, as if made of liquid night. And now, faintly, you see. Not a face, but a flicker of light behind your eyes, mirrored in the glass. Not what you are, but what you were before being seen. Outside, the wind lifts, carrying salt into the chamber. The cloth slips from your hand and falls silently to the floor. For an instant, the glass brightens. A slow bloom of silver spreading through black, and then it darkens again, quiet and still. Perhaps the monks were right to hide it. Perhaps they feared what cannot be held in sight. Or perhaps they misunderstood. The mirror never refused reflection, it only refused illusion. It showed not form, but essence. You pull the cloth back over it, gently this time as one covers a sleeping child. The hum fades. The air calms. The sea continues its long conversation with the shore, and the monastery exhales once more. Some truths are not meant to be seen, only remembered in the still water of silence. At the edge of an ocean too wide to name, where the waves dissolve into mist and the stars hang low enough to touch, there stands a lighthouse. It has no keeper now, yet the lantern still burns. Not bright, not sweeping across the horizon like a guardian of ships, but slow, steady, and strange. For its light does not face the sea. It glows inward, circling through the hollow tower, painting the stone walls with quiet warmth as if illuminating memory itself. The villagers in the coves below call it the Watcher's Heart. They say it was built by a man who grew tired of saving others. A keeper who had guided ships for 40 years through fog, storm, and darkness, until one night, when his own child's vessel was lost. After that, the beam turned inward. The sea no longer mattered. The light became his prayer. You reach the tower just after dusk. The air smells of salt and cold iron. Waves hiss at the rocks below, their rhythm slow and patient, like the breath of something half asleep. The wooden door opens without resistance. Inside, the air is heavy with oil and solitude. The spiral staircase rises along the wall. Iron steps worn thin at their centers, each one singing softly as your foot presses down. As you ascend, the sound of the sea fades, replaced by the slow, breathing hum of the lens above. Perhaps the God who never answered was never silent, only speaking in a language too vast for us to understand. Halfway up, you find the keeper's quarters, a single room carved from stone, everything neatly arranged though untouched for decades. A logbook lies open on the table. The handwriting is delicate, almost tender. Light remains, even if no one sees it. The page is dated 50 years ago. Beside the logbook sits a cracked teacup, half filled with dust, and a small framed sketch of a child in a sailor's coat. Beneath the frame, a line has been written in pencil. If I cannot guide him home, I will follow him into the dark. You continue upward. The light grows stronger now. Not blinding, but intimate, like the glow of a lantern beneath a blanket. When you reach the top, you find the great lens turning slowly, its facets catching every flicker of flame and scattering it inwards, over and over, until the whole chamber feels alive with reflected fire. The light touches every wall, every rung, every forgotten tool, circling endlessly, with nowhere to go. Should feel confined, but it doesn't. Feels infinite. The glass above hums faintly as the beam moves. And there, faintly between its rotations, you hear something. Not wind, not machinery. A whisper shaped like breath. You lean closer, and in the light's turning pulse, you glimpse the outline of a man seated in the center of the room. He is not flesh, not shadow, only presence. His hands rest on his knees, his head bowed as though listening to something within. The light passes through him, carrying his shape briefly across the wall before it fades. You do not speak. The air feels too sacred for sound. The light turns again, slower this time, and you see fragments of images cast upon the glass walls. A child running along a beach, waves catching his ankles. A storm at sea, lightning shattering the dark. A small boat vanishing beyond the fog. And finally, the lighthouse itself, burning quietly like a soul refusing to extinguish. Perhaps this is how the keeper lived after the loss, turning his lantern inward until its light revealed not the sea, but the unseen world within him. The part of grief that becomes devotion. The part of love that refuses to die. As dawn begins to rise, the wind falls quiet, and the sands smooth themselves once more. The temple disappears beneath the light, swallowed by centuries of forgetfulness. Yet, if you listen, truly listen, in the pause between breaths you might still hear it. A whisper like distant chanting carried across the desert. On one wall, scratched into the stone, you find a sentence, its letters uneven but deliberate. When there is no one left to guide, light must learn to guide itself. You stand within the circle of the lamp, and for a moment the beam rests upon you. Feels like a heartbeat, steady and patient. You realize that the lighthouse was never meant to warn ships. It was built to remind the world that even when unseen, light still exists. That illumination can turn inward, not to blind, but to remember. Outside, the fog begins to roll in from the sea, swallowing the cliffs in slow silver folds. The tower hums gently, as though exhaling after a long vigil. Below, the tide turns. The waves retreat, leaving trails of foam like forgotten prayers. When you descend, the air feels softer. Through the small window at the base, you see the beam flicker once more, then steady itself. No ship passes, no call answers. Yet the light keeps moving, faithful in its solitude. Some nights, sailors far away claim they see a faint glow on the horizon where no beacon should be. A light that does not pierce fog but warms it from within. They say it guides no one, and yet comforts all who glimpse it. Perhaps it is still turning, even now, that quiet flame searching not for lost vessels, but for the forgotten self within us all. The sea murmurs, the fog thickens, and the night folds in gently. Light facing inward, darkness at peace, too soft to be real. And somewhere within, the keeper breathes. It stands at the edge of all maps, a threshold in the wilderness where paths fade, where even the wind grows uncertain. No roads lead to it now, only a narrow line of stone markers, half swallowed by grass and time, point the way to the gate. Those who find it rarely mean to. They are travelers who have wandered too long, pilgrims whose prayers have turned quiet, seekers who no longer remember what they sought. And when they come upon it, two pillars of black basalt rising from the earth, bound by an arch that seems to hum with its own pulse. They stop, not in fear, but in recognition. The gate feels familiar, as though every journey has been moving toward it all along. The first stories of it come from ancient shepherds, written on clay tablets found near the ruins of Ugarit. They spoke of a place called Shayard Mam, the door of stillness, said to open only when the world itself paused to listen. Later scrolls, inked by monks centuries apart, told of wanderers who vanished near the mountain's edge, leaving behind only footprints that ended mid-step. Some claimed it was a doorway to the divine. Others called it the last mercy, the gate through which sorrow passed and never returned. You arrive at dusk. The sky burns faintly copper, fading to indigo. The land is vast, empty, and strangely kind. No birds, no insects, no sound at all. Even your footsteps seem muted. When you reach the gate, the air thickens, heavy with a silence so complete it feels like a presence. The basalt pillars are smooth and cold. Symbols are carved into their surface, spirals, stars, and the outline of a single open eye. Between them hangs nothing, and yet the space shimmers as though woven from heat or breath. You step closer. The wind that followed you from the hills stops. Everything holds still, and in that stillness you hear something, not with your ears, but with the body itself. A vibration, low and infinite, like the hum that lives beneath all sound. It rises from the ground, from the sky, from within you until it feels as though the air and your pulse are the same rhythm. The gate begins to glow, not with light, but with awareness. No stories agree on what lies beyond. Some say it opens to an endless plain of golden light. Others claim it reveals nothing but shadow. A few believed it leads inward, not to another world, but to the space within the heart that waits for its own silence. You hesitate, not from fear, but reverence. The air tastes faintly of rain and metal, the scent before creation, before the first word. You close your eyes and listen. Behind your breathing, behind the memory of thought, something ancient stirs. Not a voice, but the idea of one. It does not call you forward. It waits. When you open your eyes, the horizon has changed. The stars are closer now, their light trembling as though reflected on unseen water. The gate no longer stands still, it ripples, bends, and then opens. But there is no other side. Too near to be forgotten. Only vastness. Not dark, not bright, only presence. You feel as though you are standing inside the pause between two heartbeats. The world beyond is not a place but a silence so complete that it feels alive. It doesn't erase you. It includes you. The ache in your chest loosens. The weight of thought drifts away like dust in wind. Perhaps this is what the ancients meant by paradise. Not endless bliss, but endless stillness. The return to what was before sound began. Before meaning divided the sky. You step forward. Or perhaps you don't. It is impossible to tell. The gate remains, humming gently. For a moment, the air fills with faint shapes. Echoes of those who came before. A child, a monk, a traveler. All dissolving softly into the same silver calm. When you blink, the gate is closed again. The hum fades. Night spreads across the land, full and kind. You do not know if you crossed or simply remembered how to be still. The stars look different now, clearer, quieter, as if each one has drawn closer to listen. You sit beside the gate until dawn. When the first light comes, the basalt seems to shimmer like breath on glass. You reach out and it feels warm. The silence that once surrounded you now lives inside your chest. Perhaps the gate does not lead anywhere. Perhaps it opens only when we stop searching. At the edge of all things, where sound surrenders to stillness, the gate waits. Not as a door, but as a promise, that beyond the noise of all we build and lose, there is a silence vast enough to hold us. And in that silence, nothing is forgotten. Nothing is gone. Night opens like a velvet curtain, and the path descends where the earth has chosen to breathe inward. A narrow stair spirals through cool stone, each step dusted with the powder of centuries. The lantern you carry is not bright. It is a hush cupped in glass, a small moon in your hand. The air here is oceanic, damp, mineral, tinged with the scent of roots and old water. Somewhere below, a thread of sound trickles through the dark. Not wind, not voices, but the secret syllable of a hidden spring. You follow the echo as if following your own pulse, and the stair uncoils into a chamber softly veiled in mist. Only listening remains. The mountain is older than memory. Its ribs shimmer under snow and moonlight, and its heart hums faintly with wind moving through unseen caverns. Near its summit, where air becomes thin enough to taste like frost and dream, stands a shrine carved into the rock itself. No door, no gate, only a narrow passage, lit by the slow drip of melting ice. And at its center, resting on a slab of white marble, lies a single scroll. The parchment glows faintly in the dimness, its edges curled like the wings of something once alive. No ink stains its surface. Instead, symbols shimmer within the fibers themselves, appearing and vanishing as though written in breath. Those who first discovered it, centuries ago, believed it was divine. A message from a god of silence, a hymn too sacred to read aloud. So they never tried. They listened. The scroll came from no known hand. The monks of the northern valleys claimed it appeared one morning after a storm, laid gently across the altar, its cords still damp with snow. When they tried to unroll it, the air trembled, not with sound, but with vibration. The parchment moved slightly, as if resisting. Only when they stilled themselves completely, breathing as one, did it unfurl, revealing the faint pulse of invisible letters that changed with every exhale. They understood then that the message was not meant for the eyes. It was meant for the lungs. You kneel before it now, centuries later. The air inside the shrine tastes like copper and pine, old incense and new snow. The wind outside moves in long, slow sighs. Around you, candles gutter in rhythm with your breath. You do not touch the scroll, only lean close enough to feel the warmth it gives off, the pulse beneath the parchment, like something still alive. First, there is nothing, only the sound of your breathing. But then, faintly, a whisper rises, not from your ears, but from within the breath itself. Words without consonants, notes that hover between voice and wind. You realize that each inhale stirs the scroll, the faintest vibration running through its length. Each exhale brings a reply. It is not a text but a conversation, one that has been waiting for centuries to resume. The first explorers who recorded its presence noted something strange. When two or more people entered the shrine together, the scroll's rhythm changed, syncing to their collective breathing. When one stopped to rest, the letters dimmed. When all inhaled in unison, the air filled with a single clear tone, like glass being touched by light. They believed the scroll was teaching them the lost language of breath, a way to speak through silence, to listen through stillness. Perhaps this was once a practice, not an object, a sacred discipline that turned the body itself into scripture. Before alphabets, before words, before even music, humanity spoke with breath. The sighs of mothers, the chants of hunters, the hums of those who prayed without knowing to whom. The scroll remembers this. It waits patiently for each visitor to remember too. You close your eyes and breathe with it. The letters ripple softly. They do not form meaning but sensation. A feeling of vastness, of warmth spreading through the ribs. The air thickens, becomes almost visible. In that moment, you realize the scroll has never needed to be read. It has always been listening, waiting for a human voice, not to speak, but to return home to its original rhythm. Outside, a wind rises, swirling against the cliffs. The shrine trembles faintly, dust falling from its ceiling like quiet snow. One of the candles flickers out, yet the scroll glows brighter, as if fed by the movement. It hums now, a tone you do not hear but feel in the bones. Your heartbeat slows until it matches the rhythm. And then, just for an instant, you understand. Not with mind, but with marrow. The garden waits there like a held breath. The scroll is not message, it is mirror. It reflects not words, but the act of receiving. It holds no prophecy, only permission, to be still enough to hear the music of existence itself. When the wind calms, the light fades again. The scroll curls slightly, folding back into its quiet. You open your eyes and find the chamber unchanged. The air is soft, empty, and holy. Perhaps no one will ever translate what it holds, and perhaps that is mercy. Some truths dissolve when named. Some prayers exist only in the breath that carries them. You bow before it, not out of reverence, but recognition. The silence here does not erase you, it completes you. As you turn to leave, the last candle flickers once, twice, and steadies. The scroll remains, patient as ever, waiting for the next pilgrim to remember how to listen. Outside, the mountain exhales. The wind carries a sound that could be your own breath returned from afar. And somewhere deep in the stone, beneath all language, the scroll whispers again. Not to be heard, only to be felt. No sun has touched these leaves. They glow a tender gray-green, edges silvered as though dusted with starlight. Moss has taken the stone in quiet spirals, and pale vines arc like calligraphy across the ceiling's ribs. Drops gather on the tips of fern fronds and fall, one by one, into a shallow basin fed by an underground vein. Inscriptions ring the pool. Not words you can easily read, but the patient geometry of guardianship. Lines to hold, circles to bless, stars to remember. Somewhere, a moth moves in slow prayer, brushing the air with powder-fine wings. Mist drifts through the valley like breath returning to the body. Between two ridges of pale stone, where the air moves slower and the sun forgets its sharpness, stands a temple that no one built, or perhaps built so long ago that time itself has adopted it as its own. From afar, it looks half-formed, as if the mountain were remembering what it once meant to pray. Columns lean inwards, their tops lost in cloud. The roof is gone, replaced by sky. Yet something inside it still lives. They say this is where the wind first learned to speak. That in the beginning, before languages divided themselves into nations and names, the breath of the earth rose through this valley and touched the hollow stones, and the stones replied. The first dialogue between silence and sound. Every echo since, every poem, every prayer, every lullaby began here. You arrive at dusk. The light is dim and kind, the kind of gold that holds no urgency. The air carries a low vibration, almost like humming. You pause at the entrance. Two broken pillars marked with carvings so faint they resemble the veins of leaves. Between them, the doorway opens not into darkness but into a slow radiance, the color of dust in candlelight. Inside, everything seems to breathe. The walls curve like the inside of a lung, their surfaces smooth from centuries of wind passing through. In the center stands a circle of worn stones, seats perhaps or altars, each marked with the faint trace of handprints. The sound here is delicate, shaped not by echo but by memory. When you whisper, the walls respond, not with your own voice, but with something older, softer, woven through with time. For a moment, you think you hear chanting, low and rhythmic, rising and falling like waves against an unseen shore. But when you hold your breath, it continues, not from outside you but from within. The temple is not repeating your voice. It is reminding it. The few records that mention this place describe it as the sanctuary of returning voices. Pilgrims from distant ages came here not to speak, but to listen to what their own words had left behind. Every utterance, they believed, leaves a residue, a vibration that lingers long after meaning has faded. The air within this valley collects them, nourishes them, and feeds them back to those who are ready to hear. You walk deeper, tracing the carvings along the wall. Spirals, waves, crescents, and eyes. Each symbol feels less like art and more like instruction. Breathe here, the spiral seems to say. Wait here, says the crescent. In the center of the chamber lies a small basin carved from the same stone as the mountain. It holds no water, yet a faint shimmer moves across its surface, like light remembering motion. You lean over it, and for an instant you see faces, not distinct but familiar. People whose laughter you've known, whose grief you've carried, whose words have shaped your days. They flicker like candle flames and fade. The air grows warmer. The hum deepens, slow as the tide. A breeze enters through the open roof, carrying the scent of myrrh and rain. The columns seem to sigh. And then, faintly, the voices begin. Not in chorus, but one by one, as though each memory had waited its turn. A woman's whisper in a language no longer spoken. A child's laughter carried from centuries away. A monk's chant dissolving into breath. A sigh that might be your own. It is not haunting. It is homecoming. You close your eyes, and for a moment you understand. Every word ever spoken is still here. Every confession, every song, every final goodbye, none of it lost. It lingers in the fabric of air, softened by time until it becomes prayer. The temple is not a building at all, but a body made of listening. Those who whispered of this place said it was made when the surface forgot how to be kind. In years of dust, when the noon sky was a white mirror and the horizon a wavering fever dream, hands learned to dig where the sun could not follow. The old civilizations, Persian engineers with their cannots, oasis keepers tracing springs beneath the desert's ribs, understood that water could be persuaded by darkness and stone. Here, someone took that knowing and turned it toward devotion. The garden is not an accident. It is a vow. A gentle wind brushes your cheek. It feels like recognition. You realize the voices are not calling to you. They are returning through you. You have become part of the same current, breath to breath, silence to silence. Above, twilight deepens into indigo. The stars gather, their light falling through the open roof like slow snow. The whispers fade until only one remains, your own, carried back to you in the hush of wind. It sounds older, calmer, wiser. You breathe with it, and the temple breathes with you. For a moment, there is no separation, not between you and stone, not between memory and air. Perhaps that is what this place has always promised. Not revelation, but reunion. Not words, but the space that holds them. As night settles fully, the valley grows quiet again. The mist thickens, and the temple begins to fade, folding itself back into the landscape. Only the faint hum remains, like the afterglow of a long-forgotten song. You stand at the threshold once more, the air cool and still. Behind you, the silence feels alive, almost tender. Perhaps the voices were never from others at all. Perhaps they were the echoes of your own beginnings, finally finding their way home. And as you walk away into the slow breath of night, you hear it, a whisper too soft for the world, too near for forgetting, too sacred for sound. Look closely. The leaves are thin as parchment, almost translucent, veined like palms that have learned to pray. Mushrooms rise in small moons from rotting cedar, their gills fine as the pages of a soft-voiced book. A vine bears pale blossoms that open only when the air cools, night blooming like the Sirius of deserts far above. Their fragrance a low bell that rings in the blood. Across a ledge, bowls rest in a patient row. Clay, cracked and mended. Bronze bruised with age. A chipped alabaster dish that still remembers light. Perhaps monks once stirred powdered root into water here, or healed fevers with the patience of leaves. Perhaps a hermit traced constellations into the soil with a finger and asked the plants to listen. The night has gathered itself again. Slow, silver, eternal. The stories you have heard now rest upon the air like thin layers of dust, soft and holy. Each one the breath of something that once lived, once longed, once listened. They are not gone. They drift in the quiet between stars, circling like faint echoes that have finally learned to be still. The temple sleeps, but its voice remains. In the hum beneath the wind, in the rhythm of your breathing, in the pulse that moves through the world unseen. The bells that never rang, the river that forgot its source, the garden without sunlight. All these were never places, but mirrors. They have been teaching you gently, all along, that every forgotten thing still waits inside the silence of your own chest. The library of breath, the scroll that whispered through your lungs, the mirror that saw without seeing. Each was a doorway, not outward but inward. Every mystery we chase in the world is a shape cast by what already moves within us. The ancients knew this. They built with patience, they prayed through listening. They understood that what we call history is only memory learning to speak again through stone and dust. The wind outside quiets. The last of the candlelight flickers, stretching shadows like long exhalations across the walls of the mind. You feel your body slow, heartbeat, breath, thought, all aligning with the rhythm that lives beneath time. Listen. The bells are still ringing, though they make no sound. The garden still blooms beneath the dark. The faces beneath the cathedral floor have begun to smile. The keeper's light still circles through his tower. Steady, inward, endless. The gate remains open, not to another world, but to the stillness that holds them all. And here, where sound surrenders to quiet, something vast and kind unfolds. The world does not end, it exhales. You are not leaving these stories. You are returning to them. Every whisper, every breath, every pulse of ancient light will follow you now, softly, invisibly. As you drift between waking and dream, close your eyes. Let the centuries fall away like leaves in wind. This place is not lawless, keeps a liturgy of shade. Somewhere in the distance, the temple hums, the same low tone that began the first word and will outlast the last. The same hum that turns oceans, that teaches stars to move, that fills the lungs of every sleeping child. The silence deepens. The air grows warm. And then, like a final page turned in candlelight, the world folds into its own breath. No beginning, no end, only listening. The sound fades to nothing. Only the pulse of night, the hush of air, the gentle hum that has always been there. Sleep follows, quietly, as the ancient world exhales one last time. There is a rhythm to its breathing, a ceremony of damp and resting, of dew and release. When the spring swells after distant storms no one hears, the basin overflows and the channels carved into the floor carry the blessing outward in quiet lines. The vines rise with that gift and lower again when the flow withdraws, the whole chamber moving with a tide only it can feel. A small, tarnished mirror lies propped against a stone, catching the lantern's breath and sending it upward as a soft, moving star. Perhaps the keepers once brought light down in pieces, guiding it like a pilgrim's hand from bowl to bowl. This too has precedent, tales of mirrors coaxing sun into deep weavers' rooms, of polished plates warming winter seedlings. The garden accepts such stories gently, the way it accepts water, with gratitude and no fuss. On the far wall, a painting has survived in colors faded to a dream. A moon over a field of reeds, a figure kneeling with one hand on the ground and one lifted toward a sky drawn as a spiral. Beneath, a line of script still breathes through the lime wash. A single sentence, interrupted by time. The root seeks the dark that the blossom may know the light. It is the kind of truth that feels older than doctrine. The old world understood, in its bones, that life uses shadow as a gate. Seeds begin where eyes cannot go. Springs are born where feet do not wander. Even stories germinate under the soil of silence, sending up a stem only when we have grown patient enough to witness it. The lantern dims and the chamber brightens in its own soft way, not with light but with presence. You hear it then, the garden's small chorus. Drip, thread, breath, the almost inaudible creak of a tendril uncoiling, the velvet sigh of mushroom flesh settling into its shape, the basin's lip talking quietly to falling water. If you listen deeper, you may notice how your body begins to move with the cadence, your pulse pacing itself to the spring's steady hymn. Some voices, they say, only echo when we are ready to listen. Perhaps the garden has been singing for centuries, and we are only now becoming quiet enough to hear. There are marks of caretaking everywhere. A notch in the stone where a blade trimmed a root. Soot along a ceiling rib, a memory of nights when someone tended two flames, one of oil, one of leaf. A bead bracelet left on a ledge, threaded with seeds and tiny shells, as if the ocean once sent a messenger. Such fragments do not insist on a particular origin. They simply testify that hands were here. Hours were offered. A solitude was shared with green things that asked for nothing but water and gentleness. You could stay until sleep covers you like moss. Sitting at the basin's edge, you might imagine the garden at full ceremony. Bowls aligned like constellations, a mirror guiding one small sunbeam like a priest's finger along a page, a figure whispering names of herbs as if reciting a litany of old friends. Perhaps the plants were never taken, only blessed. Perhaps the cure they gave was not tincture but breathing, teaching those who entered to slow until thought found the same pace as dew. There is healing, sometimes, in consenting to the body's ancient calendar. Dark, rest, quiet growth, a bloom opening without hurry. When you rise to leave, the stair holds the damp on your skin like a benediction. Above, the desert will be waiting, star-marked and vast, its dunes the color of sleep. You look back once. The garden does not cling. It has learned the art of letting go. A drop falls into the basin. Rings widen, then vanish. Perhaps it was never meant to be found, only encountered, the way a kind word is found in passing, or a path that appears because you were walking slowly enough to see it. In the last wavering of the lantern, the painting's moon seems to breathe. Then darkness closes like a gentle palm. Nothing concludes. Nothing argues. The earth inhales, the spring answers, and the leaves go on making their quiet, sacred night. High above the valley, where the clouds rest like sleeping herons, a mountain opens its ribs to the wind. From a distance, it looks like stone, cold, inert. But as you draw nearer, you notice the dark archway carved into its side, shaped not by hands, but by time itself. The wind moves through that opening with intention, low and resonant, as though reciting something to itself. Here begins the path to the library of breath and ash. It is said the monks who built it were not scribes, but listeners. Their library held no ink, no parchment, no candlelight reading. Every scripture that ever lived here was spoken once, into the hollow of the mountain, and the echo became the archive. To enter is to disturb centuries of murmuring thought. Inside, the air is warmer, almost human. The torches flicker with sighs instead of flames, and each step seems to awaken a slumbering whisper. The walls are ribbed like the inside of a great shell, curving upward into a dome where dust drifts in slow constellations. Between the ribs hang copper discs, wind catchers, suspended by silk cords, trembling with every breath of the earth. When the wind passes through them, they sing in tones older than language. Each note, the monks believed, preserved a single line of prayer. You move deeper, and the darkness turns golden at its edges. Chambers open like lungs, expanding and contracting with the invisible rhythm of air. Some say the library was designed upon the anatomy of breath, the inhalation leading through narrow corridors, the exhalation opening into vast rooms of silence. In one such room, you find the remains of a seated figure, bones wrapped in the saffron cloth of devotion. Around him lie shards of clay vessels, as if shattered by sound. Upon each fragment is an inscription, not words, but small spirals, like the shapes wind leaves on sand. The monks called them spiracula, vessels for the voice. They would breathe into them, sealing chants within, then break them when they wished the sound to return to the world. Each shard, a released syllable. The floor is covered in them, fragments of songs scattered like fallen stars. When your hand brushes across, they hum faintly, as though remembering. A fragment of history still clings to the mountain's breath. The monks here followed an ancient order known as the Keepers of Resonance, whose faith was simple, that nothing truly spoken ever dies. The Roman historian Pliny once wrote of desert hermits who fed their prayers to the wind, believing the air to be sacred. Centuries later, desert mystics echoed that practice, breathing mantras into caves so that the earth might carry them long after their bodies were gone. This library, carved in an age when fire was both danger and promise, may have been their grand cathedral, a temple where sound replaced scripture, and silence became the only faithful reader. In one chamber, the walls are blackened, not by fire, but by soot arranged in deliberate strokes. Here the monks marked passages of silence. Each brush of ash upon stone denoted a moment of pure listening, recorded not as absence, but as a presence too large for sound. As you trace one mark, your fingers collect a thin dusting of black, a memory of breath turned to pigment. Further in, the passage narrows until the walls nearly touch your shoulders. The air trembles here. It feels alive, as though listening back. The corridor ends in a small circular vault, its center open to the sky. A shaft of silver light spills down, catching the motes of ash that dance like tiny souls returning home. Beneath that light lies a bowl of white marble, filled not with water, but with fine gray powder, the ashes of scrolls once burned during an empire's purge. When the last of the monks realized their teachings would be lost, they gathered what remained, mixed the ash with resin, and shaped it into incense. They believed that when burned, the words would rise again as breath, carrying their memory into eternity. You kneel. The air tastes faintly of smoke and myrrh, a ghost of language suspended in fragrance. If you close your eyes, you might almost hear the cadence of forgotten tongues, syllables unraveling gently into the wind. It feels less like history and more like memory, something you've never known, yet deeply remember. Outside, storms roll across the horizon, pressing their weight against the cliffs. The wind that enters the library changes tone, becoming deeper, almost mournful. It flows through the copper discs, through the hollow corridors, through the ash-lined halls, gathering every whisper as it goes. It leaves through the same gate it entered, carrying centuries of voices back into the vast, listening world. Perhaps that is the library's purpose, not to keep, but to release. Every word, once spoken, must one day return to silence. As you leave, the mountain exhales behind you, slow and full. Dust rises, catching a sliver of dawn. The world beyond feels wider now, the sky more resonant. In your chest, you sense the faint hum of the library's last lesson, that knowledge is not what we keep, but what we breathe into the world before the wind carries us away. And as the wind fades into the distance, you hear it once more. The echo of a voice that was never yours, but somehow always has been. Too quiet to hold. Too sacred to forget. It begins where memory thins into mist. A ribbon of silver winding through sand and stone, gliding beneath a sky pale as old parchment. The river moves without sound, unhurried, as though it has forgotten the purpose of flowing. Its surface is so still that clouds drift across it like unbroken glass. Travelers who once followed it claimed it was not born of rain or glacier, but of dream, that it appeared one morning after a long drought, coiling out of the horizon as if it had remembered itself into being. Villagers along its edge tell stories in hushed tones, that the river runs backward, carrying the voices of the dead, that if you stand upon its banks at dusk, you might hear your own name spoken centuries ago. Others call it the Inara, the river without beginning. Its name found carved upon the shards of an ancient stele unearthed in Mesopotamian ruins, beside symbols of stars and spirals. A language older than empire, older, perhaps, than the concept of history itself. You begin at its mouth, where it empties into a lake the color of faded silver, bordered by reeds that whisper even when there is no wind. The water is warm to the touch, as though it carries a hidden pulse. It leaves a fine shimmer upon the skin, salt, yes, but tinged with something metallic, something lunar. An archaeologist once wrote that the river might have been sacred to a vanished civilization that measured time not by the sun, but by the rhythm of water. The way it glides, they said, was the way their prayers once traveled. Slowly, endlessly, returning always to the silence they came from. Following its course, you notice how the world bends around it. The air is cooler, more patient. The dunes lean inward like listeners. Fragments of pottery rest half-buried near its edge. Blue glazes dimmed by centuries, their curves suggesting hands that once shaped them beside the current. Each fragment feels deliberate, as if the river had chosen what to keep. At intervals you find carved stones, spirals, eyes, sunbirds, markers perhaps of old rituals. The people who lived here may have poured milk or honey into its current, believing that offerings carried downstream reached the underworld. At twilight, the reflection deepens until the sky and the water exchange places. The stars seem to float beneath your feet, their light rippling in small, celestial sighs. The sound of the river changes then. It begins to murmur, faint, rhythmic, almost speech. Not the clamor of water over stone, but the soft cadence of recitation. Words without language, meaning without voice. Perhaps the earth itself is whispering to the current what it once knew. Names of lost cities, the tone of vanished bells, the breath of those who prayed and were never answered. Farther upstream, the landscape grows stranger. Columns rise from the silt like half-remembered thoughts, remnants of temples swallowed by floods. You can see faint carvings where the stone meets water, processions of figures carrying vessels, their eyes turned downward, their mouths open as if chanting to the flow. Between them, a glyph repeats itself. Two spirals entwined, one turning toward the source, the other toward the sea. The ancients may have believed the river mirrored the human spirit, one half longing to remember where it began, the other learning to let go. You rest where the current narrows into a gorge, its voice growing louder, almost insistent. The walls glisten with veins of quartz, and small alcoves open like windows into shadow. Within one, a bowl of petrified wood rests untouched, filled with water though no rain could reach it. The surface trembles, not from wind, but from sound. When you lean close, you realize the river is not only outside. It is beneath you, within the stone, moving through hidden arteries that pulse like veins. There are stories of a hermit who once followed this river his entire life. He began at the sea and walked against its flow, believing that at its source he would find the memory of creation, the first sound, the first silence. When he reached the mountains, he found no spring, no pool, only a mirror of still water in a cave. He looked into it and saw not his reflection but a vast night sky. Then he lay down beside it and never rose again. When the next traveler came, the cave was empty, and the mirror had turned dark. Some say the river continued its journey through him, and he became one with its forgetting. Perhaps that is what this river truly is, the bloodstream of the earth's own remembering, flowing backward through time to return what we have lost. Every ruin it touches seems less like decay and more like punctuation, a pause in a sentence the world is still writing. Even the stars above seem to lean closer to listen. You walk until the banks fade into stone, until the water narrows into silence. There is no source, no spring bubbling from rock, no hidden mountain heart. Only a hollow where the river disappears into the ground, sighing as it goes. The air smells faintly of copper and rain. You kneel beside it, touch the earth warm still, as if the river left behind a memory of motion. And for a moment in that hush you hear it not as sound but as presence. The echo of everything that has ever flowed. Tears, prayers, offerings, the simple washing of hands. All moving toward an unseen horizon where beginning and end are one. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was never lost. Only waiting for those who could follow its silence home. At the roof of the world, where mist drifts like unspoken thought, a monastery sleeps upon a cliff of gray stone. Its walls are wrapped in moss and prayer flags, faded to the color of dawn. The wind here has no direction. It circles gently, carrying whispers from centuries folded into its breath. And at the heart of the monastery, suspended between two ancient pillars, hangs a bell that no hand dares to strike. It is vast, a bronze moon, greened by time, etched with lines of forgotten script. Its rim bears the marks of countless offerings. Fingerprints pressed in oil, threads of saffron, petals of blue lotus that crumble to dust at the slightest touch. The monks say it has not rung for 1,000 years. And yet, on certain nights, when fog wraps the mountain like gauze, they wake trembling, hearing a tone that moves through the stone itself. Deep, low, impossible. They call it the breath of the Silent One. When the bell was cast, they say, the artisans mixed sacred metals with a measure of human breath, the final exhalation of a dying monk who had spent his life in silence. The bell was never meant for the world of sound. It was made to vibrate in the space beneath hearing, a bridge between the pulse of the earth and the hearts of those who waited upon it. You walk toward it through the cloister, your steps muted by the woven mat of years. Butter lamps flicker along the passage, their flames bowing gently to the draught. The scent of cedar and melted wax fills the air, and above you, through cracks in the beams, a thin thread of light spills down like falling prayer. The air hums faintly, not from wind, not from movement, but from memory, the kind of resonance that lingers where devotion once lived. The bell stands within a stone pavilion open to the sky. No rope, no mallet, only silence. You draw closer. Its surface glows faintly in the moonlight, patterns shifting like slow breath upon bronze. Around its base, the ground is worn smooth by generations of feet that circled it in reverence, never daring to touch. The air thickens as you stand before it, a pressure that hums softly in your bones. They say when the bell first rang, the sound was not heard but felt. The mountains shook. The snow loosened from their crowns. Birds rose in perfect silence, their wings carrying light instead of sound. For 7 days no one spoke. For 7 nights, the river in the valley below shimmered as if lit from within. The abbot who ordered its making declared that the bell had rung not to call the faithful, but to awaken the sky. But over time, the world grew louder. Kingdoms rose, wars began. The hum of machines and markets filled the valleys. The tone was lost. The monks stopped listening, then stopped believing. They sealed the bell with red thread and ashes, and vowed never again to disturb its quiet. Now, in the hour before dawn, the air changes again. A thin mist creeps up the cliffs, curling through the arches. It gathers around the bell like breath around glass. The monks sleep below, but one, an old keeper with eyes like wet stone, wakes and listens. His heart catches the faint vibration that trembles through the walls. It begins deep beneath the mountain, a murmur that moves upward through root and rock. Then it reaches the pavilion, and the bell shivers. No hand moves, no wind stirs, but the tone unfurls like a thought too sacred to speak. It moves through you, not through the ears, but through the chest, through the soft chambers of being. You feel it rather than hear it, a warmth that trembles beneath the ribs, as though each cell remembers something vast. Around you, the air ripples. The butter lamps flicker in rhythm. The bell glows briefly, a single breath of bronze light, and then stillness returns. When the vibration fades, everything seems sharper. The scent of earth, the pulse in your fingertips, the distant sound of water hidden far below. The bell remains motionless, its face calm and unchanging. Yet the silence it leaves behind feels alive, shaped, luminous. The old monk bows his head. He does not speak, for speech would only undo the stillness. There are legends that say the bell's tone reaches not outward but inward, that when it rings, it calls to the parts of the soul that have forgotten their own sound. Perhaps that is why it no longer rings for all. Perhaps the world must quiet itself first. The night fades into pale morning. Mist withdraws from the stones, curling back into the valley. The first light touches the bell's rim, tracing it in gold. For a moment, the bronze seems to breathe, inhaling the silence it created, exhaling peace. Some say the bell is still ringing, its sound spread too thin for our senses to catch, that we walk within its echo even now, in the hum of the wind, in the slow heartbeat of the earth, in the spaces between words when we dare to pause. Perhaps that is all it ever wanted, not to be struck, but to be remembered. A sound that teaches us how to listen, too soft for ears, too sacred for silence. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the earth still breathed in mist. In the half-light of dawn, an abandoned cathedral stands on the edge of a forgotten field. Its spire leaning, its windows open to the wind. The scent of moss and wet stone fills the air. Inside, the silence feels older than the building itself. No candles burn here, no choir has sung for centuries. And yet, when you step through the fractured archway, something greets you. Not sound, not motion, but presence. Beneath the broken altar, the floor dips into shadow. There, beneath the cracked marble, faces begin to emerge. Hundreds of them, some smooth as river stones, others worn by centuries of weeping rain. Their eyes are closed, lips half-parted, caught between prayer and breath. They are carved directly into the foundation, layered upon one another, as if generations had buried their likenesses beneath the weight of time. A tide of faces, pale, still, half-dreaming, pressed forever into stone. The old manuscripts speak of such cathedrals. Hidden beneath the sanctuaries of Europe, beneath the cloisters and crypts, were chambers of penitence. In them, worshippers who sought forgiveness lay their faces into wet clay. The priests would pour plaster over their features, sealing the confession in silence. When the molds hardened, they were pressed into the foundations, each one a soul returned to humility. This cathedral was said to be the last. The air is cool. You kneel beside one of the faces, tracing the hollow of its cheek. It is delicate, human, as if the stone remembers skin. A faint sheen lies across it, not from moisture but from age, like a patina of dreams. As you touch it, you imagine the moment it was made. A person kneeling, whispering the name of someone they had wronged, breathing into the clay, surrendering all sound. That breath, trapped forever beneath centuries of worship, has outlived its speaker. The nave above is open to the sky. Light filters through in shifting veils. Each time the clouds pass, the shadows across the faces change. Some seem to wake, others to drift deeper into rest. The walls hum faintly with the pulse of wind, and a feeling grows that these are not statues, but listeners. You walk deeper into the crypt, guided by the dim glow of your lantern. More faces appear. Men, women, children, crowned heads beside peasants, saints beside thieves. The line between sinner and supplicant has dissolved. In the farthest corner, a larger face rises from the stone, the features worn smooth, but the curve of its mouth unmistakable. A faint smile. Unlike the others, its eyes are open. Local legend calls it the face of the forgiver. They say every century, one of the carved faces changes expression. A slow awakening that no one witnesses, yet all feel. When famine or war passes through the valley, the people come here and press their palms to the stone, hoping the smile will return. It is not prayer they seek, but remembrance, the knowing that beneath all ruin, something still forgives. You kneel before it. The air grows thick, like the hush before thunder, but gentle. It feels as if the cathedral is breathing with you. The stones seem to warm, subtly, imperceptibly, until you feel the rhythm of a pulse. Not yours, not entirely. Somewhere deep below, water drips. One drop, then another, echoing like a heartbeat through the hollow space. The scholar who last studied this place wrote that the foundation extended far beneath the earth. What appeared as a floor was the roof of a deeper chamber, an ossuary of silence. He believed that the faces below were not carved at all, but grown, that minerals had formed around remnants of human presence, crystallizing memory into shape. He died before proving it, but his notes ended with a single line. The stone remembers every breath it ever held. You listen now. The wind outside has slowed, and the world seems to hold its breath. The light flickers over the marble like water. In that moment, the faces almost move. The closed lips tremble with the faintest exhale, a sigh too subtle for sound. A wave of peace, or perhaps sorrow, drifts through the hall. Maybe these are not the forgiven but the forgiving. Maybe the world above only stands because something below it chose to release. As the lantern dims, the last glimmer settles on the smiling face. Its eyes, though carved, seem alive with patience. You wonder what it has seen. Kings and empires rising and falling, lovers kneeling in shadow, prayers turning to silence. And still it smiles untouched by time. Outside, the rain begins again. It falls through the broken ceiling, washing over the stone. The droplets trail down each face like tears, renewing what centuries of dust have hidden. In the shimmer of that rainfall, they seem to breathe. Perhaps this was the cathedral's true purpose. Not worship, but remembrance. A place where sorrow could take form and still be beautiful. Where even silence could be shaped into mercy.